Hello, and welcome to Stellar Sleep Tales. I'm really glad you're here. Whether you've just tucked yourself into bed, dimmed the lights, or simply need something calm and thoughtful to drift off to, you've arrived in the right place. Tonight's story is a little unusual. It's not a bedtime tale in the traditional sense, and it's not exactly a lecture either. It's something in between. A quiet unfolding of ideas, a gentle walk through science and wonder, and at the center of it all is the moon. You've seen it 1,000 times, maybe more, hanging there in the sky, steady, bright, watching silently over Earth, sometimes full, sometimes new, sometimes just a thin silver smile. It's one of the most familiar sights in the world, and yet it holds secrets that most of us have never really thought about. What if I told you that the moon isn't just a light in the night sky? It's a guardian, a guide, a force of quiet influence that shapes life on Earth in ways we barely notice, but deeply rely on. And now, I want you to imagine something strange, something almost unsettling in its simplicity. Imagine the moon forgot to move. What if it stopped shifting through its phases? What if it no longer rose or set? What if it just stayed still? What would that mean for the oceans, for the sky, for us? Don't worry, nothing in tonight's story is designed to alarm you. In fact, quite the opposite. It's meant to calm you, to soothe your mind with wonder, to remind you that even the most massive forces in the universe, the ones pulling oceans and holding planets in line, can feel gentle and slow and steady. That's what we're here for tonight. A slow and thoughtful journey into stillness. Now, before we go too far, I should mention something, just in case you're new here. These episodes aren't meant to replace medical advice or professional help with sleep. They're simply quiet explorations, a blend of storytelling and science made to help you relax, and maybe drift off halfway through a sentence. And if that happens, if you close your eyes, somewhere between gravity and stillness, consider that a success. But if you're still with me, let's take the first step. Let's start with something simple. Look up at the sky in your imagination. Picture the moon, however it looks to you right now. Maybe it's a glowing full moon, or just a sliver. Maybe it's pale and ghostly in a blue afternoon sky. Maybe it's rising behind the trees in the distance now. Freeze it. Let it stay. There, no rising, no setting, no changing shape, just stillness. It might feel peaceful at first, like hitting pause on the universe. A moment of silence in a world that moves too fast. But the longer it stays still, the more you begin to wonder, what's missing? The truth is, the moon is never truly still. It's always moving slowly, quietly, but constantly. It orbits Earth once every 27.3 days. That motion gives us tides. It gives us phases. It gives the oceans their rhythm and the planet its subtle tilt and balance. The moon's gravity reaches across hundreds of thousands of miles and literally pulls on Earth, stretching it ever so slightly, tugging at the oceans, guiding the rise and fall of waves on distant shores. We don't notice it because it happens gently, rhythmically, almost musically. But if it stopped, if that subtle gravitational rhythm suddenly fell silent, everything would change. Tonight's story isn't about chaos. It's not about destruction. It's not even about fear. It's about interruption. About what happens when a familiar pattern breaks. The moon has been moving in the sky for billions of years. Civilizations have used it to tell time, plant crops, write myths, and measure tides. Animals respond to its phases. Coral release their eggs in sync with it. Birds migrate by moonlight. Ancient humans tracked it with stone and shadow. And yet, in our modern lives, we often forget it's even there. So, what happens if the moon just stops? What happens when we notice what we've lost, because we've paused what we've taken for granted? That's the journey we're on tonight. Over the next few chapters, we'll explore the science behind the moon's motion, the quiet physics that shape our world, and the delicate web of connections that depend on it. We'll imagine Earth without tides, skies without moonrise, a future where the moon drifts away slowly, and what that might mean for time, sleep, and memory. And we'll do it all gently, with pauses where your breath can slow, and your thoughts can soften. There's nothing you need to do right now. You're already here. That's enough. Let the rest of the world fade out for a while. Let your muscles relax. Let your breathing slow. This is your space now, calm, quiet, and curious. So let's begin our journey into stillness. When the moon forgot to move. When the moon forgot to move, the first thing that changed wasn't something we could see. It was something we could feel. A slow unraveling, like the background rhythm of life had gone missing. And yet, most people wouldn't have noticed it right away. The sky might look the same. The stars might still shine. But beneath the surface, the balance would begin to shift. In our last chapter, we imagined this idea, a moon that suddenly stood still in the sky. Tonight, we'll begin to understand just how deeply that stillness would matter. Because the moon isn't just a familiar shape in the night sky. It's part of the structure of Earth's balance, gravitational, environmental, even emotional. Let's begin with something we all recognize, the ocean. Every wave you've ever watched, rolling toward shore, every tide that's risen gently, or retreated quietly, was pulled, at least in part, by the moon. It might surprise you to know that the moon's gravity is constantly tugging at the Earth. It's not a violent tug, it's incredibly gentle, but constant. That steady pull creates a kind of bulge in the oceans, causing water to shift ever so slightly toward the moon. As the Earth rotates, those bulges move around the globe, giving us what we call high tide and low tide. Without the moon's motion, that constant reshaping of the oceans would start to slow, and then stop. Tides would flatten. The regular heartbeat of the sea would fade, and while that might sound peaceful, it would be anything but. Marine life depends on tides to survive. Certain species spawn only during specific phases of the moon, guided by the rhythmic rise and fall of water levels. Intertidal zones, those fragile strips of coastline that appear and disappear twice a day, are home to thousands of species that rely on the ocean's motion to breathe, feed, and reproduce. Without those tides, food chains would collapse, shorelines would dry out, ecosystems would break down silently, not with explosions or storms, but with absence, the absence of rhythm, the absence of motion. But the moon's role doesn't stop at the oceans. It also acts as a kind of stabilizer for the entire planet. You can think of Earth as a spinning top, and like any top, it wobbles. This wobble, called axial precession, is natural, but without the moon, it would become wild and unpredictable. Currently, Earth is tilted at about 23.5 degrees. That tilt is what gives us our seasons. When the northern hemisphere leans toward the sun, it's summer there. When it tilts away, it's winter. The moon's gravitational pull helps keep that tilt steady over long periods of time, thousands, even millions of years. Now imagine if the moon wasn't moving, or worse, if it was gone. That stabilizing influence would weaken. Earth's tilt could swing dramatically, even chaotically. It might shift to 45 degrees, or more. The result: seasons would become extreme and erratic. Some regions might bake under unending sunlight, while others could freeze in near-permanent twilight. Agriculture would fail. Migration patterns would vanish. Climates would collapse. But all of this wouldn't happen overnight. The real danger in a world where the moon has forgotten to move is that it happens slowly, silently, gradually enough that we might not realize anything has changed until it's already too far gone to fix. This is part of what makes the moon so powerful and so overlooked. It doesn't roar. It doesn't flash. It doesn't demand our attention. It just moves, day after day, week after week, pulling at oceans, steadying the planet. creating a rhythm that life on Earth has quietly built itself around. Even our days are shaped by this gravitational partnership. The moon is slowly pushing away from Earth, about 3.8 centimeters each year. That may sound like a tiny distance, but over millions of years, it adds up. And as the moon drifts away, Earth's rotation slows. Our days are getting longer, by about 1.7 milliseconds every century. That may not seem like much, but it's real. If you could travel back in time, hundreds of millions of years, you'd find Earth spinning faster. Days were shorter. The moon was closer. The gravitational dance was tighter, more intense. But now, the rhythm is stretching, softening. The moon is still moving, but more slowly. And someday, far in the future, it might stop altogether. And that brings us back to the thought we started with. Stillness. Hey, moon that forgets to move would mean more than a motionless light in the sky. It would mean tides that no longer rise. It would mean oceans that fall silent. It would mean a planet spinning out of balance. The moon is Earth's quiet companion, always present, always pulling, always guiding. We forget that sometimes, because it works in the background. It doesn't ask to be noticed. But once you know what it does, once you feel how deep its influence runs, it's hard not to see it differently. That light in the night sky isn't just decoration. It's structure, it's memory, it's gravity, it's rhythm. And so, when we imagine a world where the moon stands still, we're really imagining a world where balance is breaking, not in dramatic explosions, but in slow erosion. The kind of change you only notice when you stop to listen. The kind of loss that sounds like silence. That's the kind of stillness we're exploring in this series. And there's more to come, because the moon isn't just holding Earth together physically. It's shaping our perception of time, guiding the evolution of life, and even inspiring the way we think about night and day. In the next chapter, we'll take a closer look at the oceans and what really happens when the tides stop moving. But, for now, let yourself pause. Let your thoughts drift like waves in a calm sea. You don't need to remember every detail. The science will still be here if you return to it. But if your eyelids are heavy and your breath is starting to slow, maybe the moon is guiding you in its own way, toward sleep, not movement. You're safe here, and the story will continue. Tides don't announce themselves. They arrive and retreat quietly, reshaping the edges of the world every few hours. Most people don't think about them unless they live near the sea. But the truth is, tides are one of the most subtle and powerful forces shaping life on Earth, and they're made possible, almost entirely, by the moon. In our last chapter, we talked about how the moon helps keep Earth in balance, stabilizing its tilt, regulating its spin, and pulling gently at the oceans. Now, we'll zoom in on those oceans, because what happens out there in the space between the waves is a kind of quiet choreography, a rhythm that begins with the moon and spreads across entire ecosystems. The basic idea is simple. The moon's gravity pulls on Earth, and because water is fluid, it responds more than solid ground does. That pull stretches the ocean slightly toward the moon, creating a bulge, what we call the tidal effect. On the opposite side of the planet, another bulge forms as Earth itself is slightly tugged away from the water. As the planet rotates beneath these bulges, we get the familiar cycle of high tide and low tide, usually twice per day in most places. But this isn't just a quirk of physics. It's a timekeeping system, one that millions of species depend on to survive. Coral reefs, for example, use the lunar cycle to time their reproduction. On certain nights, once or twice a year, entire reefs release their eggs and sperm into the ocean at once, a coordinated spawning event triggered by the moon. These moments are brief and fragile, relying on perfect timing. If the moon stopped moving, those signals would vanish. And with them, the reef's ability to reproduce. Sea turtles also rely on lunar patterns. They return to the very beaches where they were born, guided by the moon's light and the timing of the tides. The moon helps determine when the sand is cool, when the water is high, and when it's safe to dig a nest. Without those cues, their ancient migration patterns would fall apart, confused, delayed, or stopped entirely. Even tiny creatures like grunion, small silvery fish found along the coasts of California and Mexico, wait for specific phases of the moon to spawn. They come ashore at the highest tides, lay their eggs in the sand, and then let the next tide carry the hatchlings away. It's a delicate routine that depends on the moon's precision. No moon movement, no signal, no next generation, beyond reproduction. Tides control the feeding and breathing patterns of many intertidal species, animals that live in the space between land and sea. Crabs, mussels, anemones, and snails all live in environments that are alternately submerged and exposed. These shifts dictate when they can feed, when they can hide, and when they must hold still and wait. Take mussels, for instance. During high tide, they open their shells to filter food from the water. When the tide recedes, they close up to protect themselves from drying out. Their lives are structured entirely around this rise and fall. Remove the tides, and you remove the framework of their world. It goes beyond individual species. Tides also help oxygenate coastal waters. As water flows in and out, it stirs nutrients and allows gases to exchange at the surface. Without this movement, shallow waters could become stagnant, lower in oxygen, higher in temperature, and less capable of supporting life. The moon, then, isn't just lighting up the night sky. It's orchestrating a massive, planet-wide cycle of motion and timing. It's the silent conductor of an underwater symphony, one that plays in tidal flats, coral reefs, estuaries, and shallow bays. Now imagine that music slowly fading. If the moon forgot to move, if its gravitational pattern became fixed, the tides would start to flatten. At first, the change might be subtle. The highest tides wouldn't rise quite as high. The lowest tides wouldn't retreat as far. But over time, the ocean would settle into a kind of eerie stillness, and the creatures who depend on those shifts wouldn't know when to eat, or when to hide, or when to be born. This wouldn't happen all at once. Life is resilient. Some species might adapt, others might not. But the longer the moon remained still, the more confusing and unstable the environment would become. We often think of the moon as a clock in the sky. It marks time, yes, but not just for us, for the ocean, for the animals, for the tide pools that appear like windows and vanish hours later. The moon has kept that time for billions of years, quietly, predictably, invisibly. Without it, Earth wouldn't just become less beautiful, it would become less organized. Even humans, though we don't live by the tides in the same way, are affected. Ancient cultures used the lunar cycle to track months. Farmers watched the moon to plant and harvest. Fishers timed their journeys around the tides. Some of these traditions remain today, faded but not forgotten. There's also something more emotional at play. We look at the moon and expect change. A full moon rising over water, a crescent hanging above the horizon, a new moon that makes the night especially dark. These changes mark time in a way that's almost instinctive, a rhythm we've absorbed, even if we no longer need it to survive. A frozen moon, then, wouldn't just affect the tides, or the fish, or the coral. It would unsettle something deep in our perception of the world, something tied to the passage of time itself. In the absence of that rhythm, we might feel unmoored, like something subtle had been broken. Not the clock on our wall, but the one in our bones. That's what the moon provides. Not just light, not just gravity, but structure, flow, certainty. And when that structure begins to dissolve, we're left with silence where rhythm used to be. In the next chapter, we'll explore what that silence might sound like, and how. The moon's quiet guidance extends beyond the ocean, into the very way Earth spins and breathes. But for now, let this thought settle in with you. that water knows when to rise, that life knows when to arrive, and that all of it begins with a moon that never stops moving. By now, you've started to see just how deeply the moon shapes life on Earth. In Chapter 2, we explored its steadying influence on the planet, and in Chapter 3, we followed the tides, how they rise and fall, guiding life beneath the surface. But there's another kind of rhythm the moon helps protect. One we often take for granted, the rhythm of the seasons. The Earth doesn't spin straight up and down. It's tilted, about 23.5 degrees off its vertical axis. This tilt is what gives us the difference between summer and winter. As Earth orbits the sun, different parts of the planet receive more or less direct sunlight, depending on which way Earth's tilted at that moment. In June, the northern hemisphere leans toward the sun, giving it longer days and warmer temperatures. In December, it tilts away, bringing shorter days and colder weather. The same pattern happens in reverse for the southern hemisphere. This reliable shifting of light and temperature is what allows ecosystems to organize themselves around planting, migration, hibernation, and reproduction. But what most people don't realize is that this tilt isn't perfectly steady on its own dot without any external influence. Earth would wobble over time, just like a spinning top. Scientists call this wobble axial precession. It's a slow, cyclical movement where the direction of the Earth's tilt gradually changes. But here's the important part. This wobble could become chaotic if left unchecked. And that's where the moon steps in. The moon's gravity pulls on Earth's equatorial bulge, the slight widening of the planet around its middle. That pull acts like a stabilizer, slowing down the wobble and keeping the tilt within a narrow, life-friendly range. Because of the moon, Earth's seasons remain regular, not perfect, but predictable enough for life to adapt to them. Now imagine if the moon forgot to move or disappeared entirely. Without that gravitational anchor, Earth's axial tilt could drift far more dramatically. Over long times, it could swing from its current 23.5 degrees to something closer to 45 degrees, or even more. And with each shift, the seasons would stretch, twist, or disappear altogether. In some places, summer could become a year-round experience, burning the land with relentless heat. In others, winter might arrive and never leave, plunging whole regions into permanent cold. In-between areas would swing wildly between extremes, year to year, with no regular pattern. Crops would fail, animal migrations would collapse, climates would become unrecognizable. This isn't the kind of change that happens in a single day. It would unfold slowly, over centuries. But life, especially human life, is built around long-term stability. We depend on seasons not just for temperature, but for food, water, and survival. So even small shifts would begin to ripple outward, touching everything from agriculture to weather to ecosystems. The moon's steady pull prevents that chaos. It acts like a hand on Earth's shoulder, keeping it upright enough to maintain a livable rhythm. Let's step back and think about how finely balanced all this is. Right now, Earth's climate zones, from equator to pole, exist because of this precise tilt. Rainforests, deserts, temperate forests, tundra, each one occupies a slice of the planet that's shaped by how much sunlight it receives across the year. The moon helps hold that map in place. Take the tropics, for example. Near the equator, they get direct sunlight most of the year, creating lush, wet environments. Farther north or south, seasons are more pronounced: cold winters, warm summers. If Earth's tilt were to change erratically, those zones would migrate, forests would dry out, ice caps might melt or expand. Entire regions could become uninhabitable. This kind of instability wouldn't just affect temperatures, it would also reshape wind patterns, rainfall, and ocean currents. Everything Earth does to move heat around the planet is tied to its tilt. Remove the moon's influence, and the entire system begins to stutter. Some scientists believe that without the moon, Earth might not have developed complex life at all. The seasonal regularity it provides gives organisms enough time to adapt, evolve, and thrive. It's like a cosmic metronome, a slow, reliable beat that life can grow in sync with. And now, in this story we're telling, where the moon forgot to move, we start to see how quickly things could lose their rhythm. There's something strangely emotional about imagining the seasons falling apart, not because we miss the warmth of summer or the quiet of winter, though we would, but because we're so used to knowing what's coming next. Spring follows winter. Leaves change in the fall. Snow returns each year to the same places. Without those signals, the year begins to feel ungrounded. Time itself becomes harder to measure, not by clocks, but by the world around us. This kind of drift is easy to overlook. After all, the moon doesn't glow with alarms or warnings. It moves quietly, steadily, but that movement is what steadies us in return. The next time you notice the changing seasons, the first snow, the longest day, the first flower of spring, remember that they don't just happen on their own. They happen because something is keeping Earth in line. Something patient and constant, orbiting high above, asking nothing in return. And if that something were to ever stop moving, we would feel it. Not right away. Not all at once, but deep down, in the patterns of rain and frost and blooming trees. The world would change in the next chapter. We'll go even deeper, because while the moon stabilizes Earth, it's also changing. Slowly drifting away, becoming something new, something distant. But for now, rest easy. The seasons still turn, the balance still holds, and tonight, the moon is still watching. So far, we've imagined what could happen if the moon forgot to move, how it would disturb tides, seasons, and the deep structure of life. But tonight's chapter is about something even more subtle and more real. Because in a quiet way, the moon is already forgetting how to move. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly. So slowly that we didn't even notice until recently. And yet, the truth is cosmic. The moon is drifting away inch by inch, year by year. And in doing so, it's steadily falling into something called lunar lockstep. Let's start with what that means. Right now, if you look up at the moon, from Earth, you'll always see the same side. The moon doesn't spin freely like a coin tossed into the air. Instead, it rotates at the exact same rate that it orbits Earth. One full rotation of the moon takes the same time as one full orbit around us, about 27.3 days. This is why we always see the same face, the familiar craters, the gray shadows, the bright highlands. This phenomenon is called tidal locking, and it's the result of gravity working over billions of years. Long ago, the moon did spin more freely, but Earth's gravity tugged on it unevenly, stretching the rock slightly and creating internal friction. Over time, this friction acted like a brake, slowing the moon's spin until it settled into sync with its orbit. Once that happened, the spinning and the circling aligned perfectly. The moon entered lockstep. It now turns, but only to keep pace with Earth, always showing the same face. It might seem strange to think of gravity as something that can slow rotation, but that's exactly what's happening, and not just to the moon. Earth is also changing because of this same dance. Just as Earth's gravity pulled on the moon and slowed its spin, the moon's gravity is doing the same to Earth. It's pulling on the oceans, creating tides, and through that constant shifting of water, it's stealing a little bit of Earth's rotational energy. The result is that our days are getting longer, not enough to notice in your lifetime, but if you go far enough back in time, say, 400 million years, a single day on Earth was only about 22 hours long. The moon was closer, the tides were stronger, and the spin of our planet was faster. But every year, the moon moves about 3.8 centimeters farther away, and as it drifts, it takes a bit more of Earth's momentum with it. It's a strange kind of exchange. Earth is spinning more slowly, while the moon slips farther away, like two dancers moving apart in a very slow motion waltz. Eventually, if nothing else interferes, the moon will drift so far that Earth's rotation will slow to match the moon's orbit. At that point, both will be tidally locked, not just the moon facing Earth, but Earth also turning just once per lunar orbit. In that far-off future, one side of Earth will always face the moon, and one side never will. It sounds like science fiction, but it's already begun. We're in the middle of that transformation, a process so gradual. It spans billions of years, and it raises a strange and beautiful idea. If the moon is moving away, and its rotation is already locked, then, yes, in a way, it's forgetting how to move. This is not a failure. It's a cosmic slowing down, a steady balancing of forces, a kind of planetary truce. The wild, spinning beginnings of Earth and Moon are giving way to calm, to stillness, to alignment. But that stillness has consequences. As the moon moves away, its influence on Earth weakens, tides become smaller, axial stability becomes looser. The gravitational bond that once held oceans in rhythm and seasons in line begins to stretch thin. It's not enough to harm us now, but far, far in the future, it will matter. Imagine, for a moment, being on Earth when the moon is twice as far away as it is now. Its shape would shrink in the sky, smaller, paler, less commanding. The tides would barely rise. Nights would be darker. The connection would still exist, but it would feel more distant, like a whisper instead of a pull. And yet, this slow retreat is not tragic. It's natural. In fact, it's how many moons across the solar system behave. Tidal locking is common. Even Pluto and its moon Charon are tidally locked to each other. It's a kind of gravitational settling, a way for planets and moons to come into balance over time. Still, there's something poetic, even emotional, about knowing that the moon's movement is changing, that the force which once pulled oceans and lit up prehistoric skies is slowly, patiently, slowing down. When we say the moon forgot to move, it's partly imagination, but also partly prediction. One day, that stillness may be real, and when that happens, when Earth and Moon face each other in silence, with no more changing faces, no more drift, no more tidal theft, the story will shift again. Earth will be different, the Moon will be distant, and the quiet balance they shared will be complete. But for now, here we are, somewhere in the middle of that cosmic journey. The moon still moves, just enough to keep our days shaped and our tides alive. It still pulls at us, still watches us, still reminds us of the power of slow change. You don't have to feel all of this right now. Just know that it's happening quietly, patiently, over eons. And the next time you look at the moon and see the same face you always do, remember, it didn't used to be that way, and it won't always stay the same. We are living in a rare and delicate moment of cosmic balance, a moment between fast and still, between wild beginnings and settled endings. In the next chapter, we'll turn to something more personal. How ancient humans watched the moon and shaped their myths, rituals, and calendars around its movement. We'll explore how even now, we carry its rhythm inside us, in stories, in symbols, in sleep. But for tonight, rest in this truth. The moon is moving slower, Earth is spinning slower, and time is unfolding exactly as it was meant to. There's something oddly comforting about the changing moon. We don't always notice it, but it's there, waxing and waning like a silent metronome. In the sky, one night it's a delicate crescent, barely visible. A few days later, it swells into a glowing disk. Then it shrinks again, slowly disappearing into shadow. This quiet, consistent cycle has been unfolding for as long as humans have looked up. Now, imagine that cycle ends. The moon no longer rises from the horizon or drifts across the night. It no longer fades or grows. No half moon, no new moon, no full moon overhead. Instead, it becomes fixed, motionless. always in the same spot, the same shape, the same face. At first it might not seem like such a big change. After all, it's still there, still visible, still glowing softly above the earth. But over time, the emotional effects of this stillness begin to surface. You'd notice it one evening, stepping outside to find the moon sitting in the exact same place it was the night before and the night before that. No rising, no setting, no rotation, just ... stillness, suspended. Some parts of the world would see permanent moonlight, the moon frozen high in the sky, casting its silver glow night after night. Other regions might never see it again, their skies emptied of that familiar presence. For those places, the moon would vanish, as if it had turned its back forever, and slowly, you'd feel the change inside you, not as fear, not as danger, but as something subtle and strange, like a story that suddenly stopped being told. The moon has always meant more than just light in the sky. It's a marker of time, woven into the very structure of human life. Ancient calendars were built around its phases. Entire cultures measured months by the moon. The word month itself comes from moon. For millennia, people watched the moon to guide planting, harvesting, praying, fasting, and gathering. The full moon brought tides, but also festivals. New moons marked beginnings. Without that change, without that cycle, our sense of rhythm begins to weaken. Imagine poets without metaphors of the waning moon. Imagine children never watching a crescent shift into a glowing circle. Imagine a world where the moon became static, more like a spotlight than a symbol. Dreams would lose a kind of quiet reference point. Stories might feel less connected to the sky. There would be no once-in-a-blue moon, no dark side waxing its mystery, no lunar eclipses to gather and marvel at. Moon rituals, traditions, and mythologies passed down across cultures would begin to lose meaning, because the moon that inspired them is no longer moving. This stillness might even affect how we feel about time itself. Human sleep, reproduction, and behavior are gently influenced by the moon's cycle, not in rigid ways, but in the soft undertones of biology and mood. Certain animals, including humans, subtly respond to moonlight, even if they're not fully aware of it. Without that cycle, those responses might flatten, sleep patterns might shift, circadian rhythms could feel ever so slightly off, not broken, but dulled, and on a deeper, more emotional level, something else might be lost. Wonder. Because part of what makes the moon powerful is its change, that it can be different each night, that it surprises us, that it rises late or early, that it hides, then returns. This behavior makes it feel alive, like a presence, not just a rock in the sky, but a frozen moon, a moon that never shifts or evolves. That moon feels colder, less human, more distant. In a way it would be like watching an old friend go silent, still present, still near, but not quite themselves anymore, not communicating. We don't always realize how emotional the moon really is for us. We write songs about it. We attach longing, peace, mystery, and magic to its glow. It becomes a symbol of reflection, loneliness, comfort, depending on the night. Remove its motion, and the symbol loses its voice. It remains in place, but its meaning fades, not instantly, slowly, quietly, like a candle left in the corner, still burning, but forgotten. It's not just about science anymore, it's about connection. The moon has never spoken, but it has always moved, and in that motion, we've seen cycles we can trust. Not just the passage of time, but the idea that things rise, change, and return. The stillness breaks that pattern, and in its place, we are left to wonder, not at the moon's new position, but at what's missing from the night in the next chapter. We'll explore how ancient humans mapped their stories into the moon, building calendars, myths, and meaning around its shifting face. we'll see how deeply lunar movement shaped early civilization, and how a moon that stopped changing would ripple through that history, erasing more than just tides or light. But for now, let this thought settle, that even silence has weight, that even stillness can feel heavy, and that when the moon forgets to move, we feel it in ways no instrument can measure. By now we've seen how a motionless moon would change the world, not just physically in tides, seasons, or Earth's tilt, but emotionally too. We've imagined the weight of a sky that never shifts, of a moon that stands still, silent, and unchanging. But what comes next? Life, as it always has, would begin to adapt, because adaptation is what life does. It doesn't wait for things to go back to how they were. It bends, reshapes, and eventually grows into the new world, however strange it may seem at first. So let's take a quiet step forward into the realm of possibility. In a future where the moon has forgotten to move, what might life look like? Let's begin with animals, especially those that have evolved under the influence of lunar patterns. Many marine species, for example, time their behaviors according to the tides. Corals release their spawn in synchrony with the full moon. Horseshoe crabs crawl ashore by moonlight. Sea turtles, guided by the glow and gravitational cues of the moon, return to the beaches where they were born, and smaller creatures like certain snails, worms, and fish move with a rhythm set by the lunar calendar. If that rhythm vanishes, would those species vanish too? Maybe some would, but others would begin to adapt slowly, over generations. Some might shift their timing to respond to other natural cues, water temperature, sun cycles, pressure changes. Others might evolve internal clocks no longer dependent on moonlight. In place of the lunar rhythm, a new biological metronome would emerge, one rooted in the altered world around them. Even terrestrial animals, like birds and insects, many of which use moonlight for navigation, mating, or migration, would feel the change. But like everything else in nature, they'd find new strategies. Some might become more selective, others could lean into magnetism, or even chemical signaling. The moon would no longer lead, so they would find new leaders. And what about us humans? We're more flexible than most species, but we're also deeply symbolic. For thousands of years, the moon has shaped not just our rituals and calendars, but our stories, our sense of time, and even our language. In a world where the moon stopped moving, we would be forced to rebuild that symbolic system from the ground up. Let's start with time. The word month comes from the moon. Early calendars tracked the lunar cycle to mark the passing of weeks. Religious holidays, agricultural seasons, even pay periods once aligned with the waxing and waning of moonlight. If the moon no longer changed, those reference points would dissolve. Cultures might shift entirely to solar calendars, or invent new units of time disconnected from any celestial body. Digital systems, satellite timekeeping, atomic clocks, these would take over as the primary source of structure. Time would become more technical, less natural, but it would still exist, and yet, something would be missing. To replace what was lost, societies might invent new rituals, new ways to feel rhythm where none exists in nature. Perhaps lights would be cast across cities in monthly waves, mimicking the moon's former glow. Maybe artificial tides would be created in art, in music, in festivals, events that rise and fall in symbolic cycles. Just to remind people that time still breathes. Religions might evolve too. In the absence of lunar phases, spiritual practices would likely shift. Some might interpret the moon's stillness as divine silence, others as a call to build new relationships with the cosmos. Mythologies could grow around this motionless moon, imagining its stillness as a form of watching, or resting, or waiting. Culturally, we would not ignore the moon, we would reinterpret it biologically. Our own bodies might also change. There's early evidence suggesting human sleep, mood, and hormonal cycles are lightly influenced by the moon. particularly its brightness during the full phase. Over centuries without those shifts, our internal systems might recalibrate. Circadian rhythms would become even more solar. Sleep cycles might become more uniform. Or perhaps, we would rely more on artificial cues, scheduled light, structured sleep environments, even hormone supplements to maintain balance. And in some speculative futures, we might engineer new rhythms ourselves with advanced technology. It's possible humanity would simulate the effects of a moving moon in coastal cities. Artificial tides could be used to oxygenate ecosystems. In schools or clinics, light systems might pulse in multi-week patterns, mimicking lunar cycles for those who still feel tethered to them. In virtual spaces, people could choose their own moon phase, a personal sky, moving just for them. There's even a possibility that, over long spans of time, we stop looking to the moon entirely. Future generations, born into a world where it never moves, might not feel the loss we do. They would have no memory of lunar phases, of rising moons, or tide charts. The moon would be like a landmark, static, distant, familiar, but not alive. It would be part of the background, a fact, not a fourth thought. And yet, deep in the human psyche, there's always a longing for rhythm, so perhaps, in art, in music, in dreams, we would still find ways to reflect what the moon used to mean. Writers might invent stories about a time when the sky changed. Painters could capture imaginary moonscapes in flux. Children might ask their grandparents what a full moon used to look like, and listen wide-eyed as they heard of a world that breathed with lunar motion in this imagined future. The moon becomes not a guide, but a memory, a quiet echo of how life once measured time. And maybe that's enough, because just as life adapted to the moon, it would also adapt without it. Not instantly, not easily, but inevitably. The real loss would not be scientific, it would be symbolic. But humans are builders of symbols. If the moon stopped moving, we would build new ones, and in doing so, find new meaning. In the next chapter, we'll explore a quieter shift, how light from a frozen moon would change our nights, our atmosphere, and our dreams. Because whether it's shining or hidden, the moon's light has always shaped how we sleep. But for now, rest in this quiet thought. Even in stillness, life moves on. Even without rhythm, we find patterns, and even if the moon forgets, we remember. Before the moon forgot to move, before it ever rose or lit the oceans, there was a time when the earth had no moon at all. To truly understand what the moon has given us, in tides, light, rhythm, and balance, we must first go back to a time when none of it existed. A time before lunar pull, before quiet nights, before even the idea of a moonlit sky. Let's travel more than 4.5 billion years into the past. The earth is newly formed, still young, still unstable. It's not the lush blue world we know. It's raw, violent, a spinning sphere of molten rock, gas, and fire. The surface is a churning sea of lava. Volcanoes erupt constantly. Meteorites crash down without warning. The atmosphere is toxic, thick with carbon dioxide, ammonia, and water vapor. There are no continents, no oceans, no life, and most importantly, number moon. In those earliest days, Earth spun much faster than it does now. A day might have lasted only 5 or 6 hours. The centrifugal force made the planet slightly flattened at the poles, bulging at the equator. Winds were stronger. Storms, if they existed, would have been brutal and short-lived. The chaos of early Earth was relentless. But that chaos didn't last forever. Something enormous happened, something that would change Earth and life forever. According to what scientists call the giant impact theory, a largest object, a protoplanet often named Theia, collided with Earth. This wasn't just a glancing blow. It was a cataclysmic crash, a collision of unimaginable energy. The impact vaporized vast portions of both Theia and Earth's outer layers. Molten rock and metal were ejected into space, a cloud of debris circling the planet like a fiery halo. Over time, possibly just a few weeks or months, that debris began to clump together. Gravity pulled it inward, tighter and tighter, until a single glowing body formed. This was the moon, still molten, still unstable, but distinct. In those early moments, the moon orbited far closer to Earth than it does today. Perhaps only 15,000 miles away, it would have loomed enormous in the sky, many times larger than the moon we know now. Its gravitational pull would have been fierce. Tides, even on a molten planet, would have surged and crashed with incredible force. This was the beginning of Earth's partnership with the moon. The moon began shaping Earth not through light, but through gravity. It slowed Earth's rotation. It tugged at the planet's bulges, creating the earliest versions of tides, not in oceans, but in the semi-molten crust. It helped stabilize Earth's axis, gradually bringing order to the planet's wild spin. Without the moon's influence, Earth's tilt could have swung erratically over millions of years, causing extreme climate shifts and unstable seasons. In a way, the moon acted as a cosmic anchor. Over time, Earth cooled. The crust solidified. Water vapor condensed into oceans. The sky began to clear. And as things calmed, life began to take root. Simple life, at first microscopic, single-celled organisms, clinging to volcanic vents or floating in shallow pools. But slowly, with every tidal cycle, every lunar month, that life began to grow more complex. The moon became part of life's rhythm, even before humans looked up and wrote stories in the stars. The moon had already shaped Earth's biology. The moon helped stir oceans, cycle nutrients, and oxygenate waters. It created tidal pools, safe, shifting spaces where life could experiment with form and function. Some scientists believe that the moon's tidal influence may have played a key role in life's leap from sea to land. So what if that impact never happened? What if they missed the Earth without a moon would be darker, faster spinning, less stable? Days would be shorter, nights longer. The axis of the planet might wobble wildly, leading to erratic climates that challenge the survival of complex life. Tides would still exist, caused by the sun, but they would be weaker, more regular, and far less dramatic. Evolution might still happen, life might still emerge, but it would unfold differently, perhaps more slowly, perhaps not at all. The moon, born from violence, became a kind of quiet architect, shaping Earth's oceans, climate, even its emotional tone, and eventually, it shaped us. When early humans emerged, we found the moon already in place, glowing, changing, pulling at our waters and our minds. We never knew a world without it. We never had to imagine night skies with no reflection. The moon was just there, as though it had always been. But now, in imagining a future where the moon freezes, we return to a time when Earth had to survive without it. That comparison tells us something profound. The moon didn't just happen to be there. It transformed the planet. It created the conditions that made complex life, and eventually consciousness, possible. And in doing so, it became more than rock and dust. It became part of the story, not just of the sky, but of life itself. In the next chapter, we'll shift back to the future and ask what would happen to Earth's skies if the moon stopped rising and setting. What would night look like? Without phases, without reflection, without lunar movement? How would that affect our dreams, our sleep, and our inner rhythm? But for now, close your eyes and picture this: a fiery planet spinning too fast, a sudden collision lighting the sky, and out of that chaos, a moon is born. By now we've talked about tides, time, light, and lunar rhythms, the obvious ways the moon touches our world. But there are deeper forces at play. Quiet, invisible, ones beneath our feet, beneath the oceans, beneath even memory itself. To truly understand what the moon gives us, we must look inside the Earth. because its pull doesn't stop at the surface. It reaches deeper, to the core. Let's begin with a simple truth. Gravity doesn't just affect oceans. It affects rock, land, molten metal. The moon's gravitational influence tugs at the entire planet, causing a gentle flexing of the crust, mantle, and core. These are called earth tides, subtle but measurable shifts in the solid earth itself. Each day, the moon's position creates tiny bulges in the earth's surface. They're not as dramatic as ocean tides, of course, but they happen. Rocks rise and fall. Pressure builds and releases. Over time, this tidal flexing influences tectonic activity, the slow movement of the plates beneath Earth's surface. In other words, the moon may help keep our planet geologically alive. Scientists believe that the moon's steady tug adds a small but important layer of friction and heat deep within the planet. This helps stir the molten outer core and may even contribute to convection currents, the churning motions that drive tectonic plates. These same processes are responsible for earthquakes, volcanic activity, and mountain formation. Take away the moon's motion, and something strange begins to happen. Not immediately, but over centuries. The subtle internal dance would begin to change. Tidal friction would decrease. The core might cool more rapidly. The mantle would stir less. Tectonic plates could slow. Volcanoes would erupt less often. Earthquakes might become more infrequent, but also more unpredictable. This geological stillness might sound peaceful, but it's not, because a planet that doesn't move stops evolving. Tectonic activity plays a vital role in life on Earth. It recycles carbon. It creates new land. It maintains the delicate balance of atmospheric gases. Volcanoes, for all their danger, release carbon dioxide and other chemicals that help regulate global temperatures over long times. Earthquakes shift the crust, keeping pressure and energy moving through the planet like a giant circulatory system. If all of that slows down, Earth begins to stagnate. Let's now turn to the oceans. Ocean currents, the great conveyor belts of warm and cold water, are driven by a combination of wind, temperature, salinity, and yes, gravity. Lunar tides help stir the oceans, keeping currents in motion and preventing layers of water from growing to still or stratified. These currents regulate global temperatures, move nutrients, and support marine ecosystems on a vast scale. If the moon's movement ceased, tides would flatten, currents might lose momentum. In shallow seas, water could grow stagnant, nutrient cycling could weaken. Fisheries might collapse. Temperature gradients would sharpen, creating more extreme climates in coastal regions. Weather systems, which depend on ocean heat distribution, would also change. Storms might grow stronger in some places and weaker in others. Rainfall patterns could shift. Some regions might face intense droughts. Others might see flooding. Global climate would become harder to predict, not because of chaos, but because of imbalance. Without the moon's steady stirring, nature loses one of its most reliable mixing tools. And there's something else, something even longer term. The moon may also play a role in regulating Earth's Milankovitch cycles, the slow rhythmic changes in Earth's orbit and axial tilt that drive ice ages and warm periods. These cycles unfold over tens of thousands of years, but they're deeply influenced by the moon's gravitational stabilizing effect. Without the moon's presence, or if the moon becomes motionless, Earth's tilt could shift more dramatically over time. This would throw those long-term climate cycles into disarray. Ice ages could become more extreme, or disappear altogether. Warm periods could last longer than expected, disrupting the natural balance that life has adapted to over millions of years. In this way, the moon isn't just a light in the sky, it's a climate regulator. Its movement ensures that energy flows, that balance is maintained, and that Earth remains a dynamic, evolving world. But in a future where the moon stands still, stillness becomes the enemy. Without lunar tides and gravity working in harmony, Earth may grow quieter, but not calmer. less violent, but not safer. A slowing of Earth's deep systems could make recovery from disasters harder. Recovery from environmental stress could take longer. Nature would become less responsive, less adaptable, and for life, that's dangerous. Humans might respond with technology, artificial currents, geoengineering, climate interventions. But those solutions are temporary patches for a system that was once self-regulating. The moon was never loud or forceful, but it was dependable. A background rhythm that kept things moving at just the right pace. Without it, the planet doesn't fall apart instantly, it just loses its breath. The deep geophysics of Earth would begin to hold still, and that stillness would eventually touch everything. From the deepest trenches of the sea to the quiet forests above, from wind currents to tectonic plates, motion would slow dot, and the planet we once knew, alive, pulsing, shifting, would grow still in a way that feels unnatural. In the next chapter, we'll shift from the core to the stars and explore how the moon's absence would change our night sky, how constellations, navigation, and stargazing traditions would evolve if the moon no longer wandered across the heavens. But for now, just rest in this quiet realization. The moon doesn't just guide waves or mark calendars. It stirs the inside of our world, and in doing so, keeps Earth breathing. Long before telescopes, or physics, or science could explain it, humans looked up at the moon and felt something: wonder, fear, longing, love. Across every culture, continent, and generation, the moon has been more than a rock in the sky. It has been a mirror for the human imagination, reflecting our emotions, shaping our stories, guiding our beliefs. Tonight, let's explore that connection, not through science, but through the lens of myth, meaning, and memory. For as long as we've told stories, the moon has been part of them. Ancient civilizations watched its phases and built entire calendars around its rhythm. Lunar months helped people track planting seasons, harvests, and ceremonies. The full moon was a signal to gather, to rest, to celebrate. New moons marked fresh beginnings. Even in pre-literate societies, people knew how to read the moon. It was a natural clock, soft, consistent, and trustworthy. But it was also a character to the Greeks. The moon was Selene, a goddess who rode a silver chariot across the night sky. In Rome, she became Luna. In ancient China, the moon housed the jade rabbit, forever pounding the elixir of life. In many indigenous traditions, the moon was a wise elder, sometimes feminine, sometimes male, always watching. In Africa, the Dogon people believed the moon brought order. In India, it was Chandra, the milk-white deity with deep emotional power. In Norse mythology, Mani was a god chased by wolves. And in countless love stories from Shakespeare to folk songs, the moon was a silent witness to heartbreak, longing, and reunion. Even fears found a home in moonlight. The word lunatic comes from Luna, born from the belief that the full moon could stir madness. Tales of werewolves, shapeshifters, and moon-touched dreamers became part of folklore. And all across the world, people noticed how sleep, emotion, and even childbirth seemed to follow the moon's cycle. It became clear, the moon wasn't just a thing we observed, it was something we felt. But now, imagine a world where that presence has changed, where the moon no longer rises or sets, where it doesn't wax or wane, it simply hovers, fixed, still, unmoving in the sky. What happens to our stories then? What becomes of mythology when the subject of worship goes silent? At first, the change would be unsettling. Artists, poets, and spiritual leaders would struggle to reinterpret something that no longer behaves the way it always has. The moon's symbolism, its motion, its transformation, would no longer match reality. The stories would begin to feel outdated. Lunar festivals might become nostalgic reenactments. Religious ceremonies could shift to focus on the sun or stars instead, and new myths might emerge, stories that try to explain the stillness. Some might say the moon is sleeping, Others might claim it's watching more closely than ever. Dreams would change, too. For centuries, people have associated certain dreams with the full moon: vivid, strange, emotional. Even in modern sleep studies, there are hints that the moon's light subtly affects sleep cycles, melatonin production, and dream quality. In a world with no lunar phases, those rhythms might flatten. Our dreams could become less dynamic, or maybe they'd evolve. Perhaps people would begin dreaming of a moving moon, a subconscious echo of what used to be. The stillness in the sky might inspire a surge in imagination, a longing that pours itself into dream worlds instead. Over time, entire generations would grow up never seeing the moon change. For them, stories of transformation, of waxing and waning, of tides and time, might seem mythical, almost unbelievable. And yet, something about those stories might still resonate, because what the moon represents doesn't vanish just because it stands still. It still hangs there, glowing, distant, eternal. It still pulls at the ocean, though less. It still lights our nights. It still offers a canvas for wonder. And so new stories would take shape. Stories of constancy, of silence, of watching without moving. The moon might become a symbol of patience, or endurance, or quiet grief. Perhaps cultures would begin to celebrate the last full moon, the moment just before everything changed. A turning point in myth, marking the transition from one kind of world to another. And through it all, humans would continue doing what they've always done. We would keep dreaming. We would write new songs, invent new gods, and tell our children new tales. Because even if the moon stops moving, our imaginations never do. Even a silent sky can become sacred, if we choose to make it so. In the next chapter, we'll move into the final emotional themes. What would it feel like to grow up never knowing the moon's motion? A generation raised under a frozen sky. Would they miss what they've never seen? Or would they find their own forms of lunar wonder? But for now, close your eyes and consider this. We are not just shaped by science, we are shaped by symbols. And some of the strongest symbols glow in the dark. We've journeyed through a world where the moon has stopped moving, where lunar light no longer drifts across the sky, and tides no longer breathe with the sea. But what if the stillness didn't stop there? What if one day, Earth stops spinning too? This isn't fantasy. It's a long-term consequence of the same cosmic forces we've already begun to explore. Just as the moon has slowly become tidally locked to Earth, always showing us the same face, Earth, too, is gradually being affected by the moon's gravitational pull. It's a slow, invisible process. The moon tugs at Earth, creating tides. Those tides drag against the planet's rotation, ever so slightly slowing it down. Every few centuries, the length of a day increases, not by much, just milliseconds, but over millions, even billions of years. That change accumulates, eventually in a future far beyond anything we will witness. Earth may become tidally locked to the moon. That means one side of Earth will always face the moon, while the other never sees it again. A perfect balance of gravity and rotation. A cosmic lockstep. But the story doesn't stop there. The sun, too, plays a role in shaping motion. It exerts gravitational force on Earth as well, much stronger than the moon's. And over unimaginable stretches of time, it's possible that Earth could become tidally locked to the sun. In that future, a full day would last an entire year, and then, eventually, the Earth might stop spinning altogether. One side of the planet would always face the sun locked in eternal daylight. The other side would face away, plunged into endless night. Imagine that for a moment, half the Earth bathed forever in sunlight, heat, radiation, a sky that never darkens. No sunsets, no stars, just perpetual noon. The other half frozen in eternal darkness, cold, silence. A sky filled with distant stars that never move. An endless midnight. The equator, the band between the two, would be the only region where The light might shift, where day meets night, in a kind of eerie twilight belt. Temperatures there might be survivable. Winds, however, would be unimaginable. A never-ending storm, where hot air from the bright side rushes toward the cold, generating violent turbulence across continents. In this split world, life would change and survive, but not as we know it. On the sunward side, organisms might evolve to handle extreme heat. Plants, if they exist, could grow with thick reflective leaves or burrow underground. Humans, if we're still here, might live in shielded cities, venturing out only in armored suits. Solar energy would be plentiful, but constant. On the dark side, survival would be harder. Any remaining life would need to produce its own heat, or cling to geothermal sources beneath the crust. Artificial light might replace sunlight. Civilization could continue in vast underground networks, powered by nuclear or geothermal energy. Perhaps massive mirrors would be built in orbit to bounce light onto the darkened Earth, recreating day where night never ends. Psychologically, this would change everything. Humans evolved with cycles, night and day, work and rest, light and dark. In this future, that rhythm is gone. People on the dark side might never see a natural sunrise. Children on the bright side might never learn the meaning of night. The moon, once a gentle clock in the sky, would feel distant and useless. Our concept of time, even our understanding of sleep, would evolve or fracture. This locked Earth would challenge everything we've built. Cultures might split across hemispheres. Myths would shift. Languages could diverge. The sunward side might grow to worship light, while the dark side learns to venerate shadow. Day and night would become more than conditions. They would define identity. Geologically, Earth would change too. Tectonic activity might slow, as one side constantly absorbs heat while the other radiates it into space. Ocean currents would collapse. Climate systems as we know them would disappear. Ice would expand permanently across the night side. Deserts might spread across the scorched side. Yet somehow, life would adapt. It always does. The locked Earth wouldn't be dead. It would be different, alien, unfamiliar, but it would still be a home, a place of resilience, creativity, and survival. And maybe, in some distant outpost along the twilight line, where stars are still visible, and the sun hangs forever at the horizon, a child would look up and ask what it used to be like when the sky changed, when the moon moved, when day followed night, and perhaps an elder would answer, "It was beautiful, but the stillness we have now, it's something new." In the next and final chapter, we'll slow to our last breath in this cosmic journey, a quiet return to the present, to gratitude for a world that still spins, for nights that still fall, and for the moon that still moves. But for now, just rest in this idea: the Earth will not always be the way it is. But even in a frozen world, life remembers how to move. You've walked with me through a long, quiet dream, from the moon's motion to its stillness, from shifting tides to frozen worlds, from the beginning of Earth to the farthest ends of time. Now we're here, at the edge of it all, and it's okay to pause. Let's take a slow breath together, not to rush forward, but to look gently back. We began with a simple question: what if the moon stopped? And together, we let that idea stretch out. We followed it carefully, calmly, through science, memory, and imagination. We saw how tides would fade, how oceans would lose their rhythm, how sea creatures, some microscopic, others ancient, would drift without their cue. We watched Earth's seasons unravel as its axis wobbled in confusion. Without the moon's guiding pull, summer and winter could switch places without warning. A planet without balance. We discovered how the moon is already slowing, inch by inch, year by year, a quiet truth of physics we almost never think about. And we imagined what might happen if that slow drift stretched into silence. What happens when change stops? We pictured long nights with a moon that no longer rises or falls. a sky without rhythm. We explored how human emotion, culture, and myth might shift, how people would grieve the loss of movement and slowly build new meaning from stillness. And then we moved outward. We saw how even Earth might stop spinning, locked forever in sunlight or darkness. Half the world burning, the other half asleep in cold shadow, and yet, somehow, life adapting anyway. But through all these shifts, the tides, the sky, the planet, even our place within it, one thing remained. Stillness itself wasn't the end. It was just another stage. That's the heart of this chapter, because whether the moon moves or not, whether Earth spins or freezes, whether time flows quickly or slows to a crawl, what you are feeling right now, in this moment, is a kind of peace. Nothing here is a warning. Nothing here is disaster. The forgetting of the moon is not an apocalypse. It's a lullaby written across billions of years. You are part of a world that has changed more times than we can count, and yet, here you are, breathing, listening, dreaming. The moon has seen mass extinctions, asteroid impacts, global floods, and shifting continents. It's looked down on the first single-celled organisms, and now it watches over you. And one day, it may stop turning. It may grow quiet, but you won't forget. We'll remember the stories, the light, the pull of the tides, and the feeling of looking up at a sky that moved. We'll pass that memory forward, through art, science, song, and quiet moments like this one. And in that memory, the moon will always move. So now, as we return to the present, to the softness of your pillow, to the sound of your own breath, to the world outside your window, know that you are small, and that's not a weakness, it's comfort, because in a universe this vast, you don't have to carry everything. You only need to rest, and trust that everything keeps moving, even when you stop, even when the moon forgets, even when sleep finally arrives. You're safe, you're still, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Good night.